Good morning. Happy Monday. It's Instagram live time. How are you? How you feeling today? Today feels very Monday. I woke up in an okay mood, but as soon as I got my day started, the irritability hit me like a sock full of nickels, just right upside my head. And so I'm not fighting the irritability. I'm just feeling it. Really? Whatever. Hi, Winter. So I'm not fighting the irritability. I feel it, and I just would like to not feel this way. But I do. And so here we are. The sun enters Virgo tomorrow. Mercury and Venus are already there. Did their little thing last week. And next week Mars enters Virgo, and then we have a new moon in Virgo. So once again, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, all in the same sign at the same time. Can I just tell you that is unprecedented? Meaning, like, having all three of the quicker moving planets, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, in the same sign at the same time as the new moon in that sign is like, I had to go back and look and be like, okay, so has this ever happened before? Like, we've had massive stelliums of planets, don't get me wrong. But like 3 in a row, and then for it all to culminate in an eclipse where not only Sun, Moon, Mercury all in the same sign, but Jupiter and Saturn too in Sagittarius, that an eclipse, that ain't happened, babies. That is never happened before's in the past. So as I was telling my clients yesterday at Haji Healing Salon, that when we have unprecedented astrology, it means that we are having unprecedented experiences and unprecedented opportunities to do and be different. How many of us are totally not the same person we were in January of 2017? To the point that the amount of change that we have made in ourselves, did I say January 2017? I meant January 2019, but you get my point. To the point that the amount of change we've endured in 2019 is analogous to like 3 or 4 years of change. That's what it feels like. It feels like, we've had unprecedented external circumstances, kind of like a critical mass being reached all at once in a variety of areas of our lives. That's it though. That is what Sagittarius is all about, feeling so connected to my morals and who I want to be. That's what Char Jean said, which is so true. That's what Sagittarius is about. But one of the things I keep reiterating, and I think every time we have a new influx of astrological focus, our perspective shifts just a little bit, and also a lot of it. I've been talking a lot about identity being a belief system, and what they having over here? Okay, they got a little something going on. I've talked a lot about identity being a belief system, and every single day I just get new perspective on what that means and the implications of that for how I interact and perceive other people and my interactions with them. identity being a belief system is so much about story and myth. And what gets trippy when we get to Virgo is that we have to deal with our conflation of fact versus truth. And this is really hard because there is a rebelliousness against myth and spirituality that seeks to replace it with scientism instead of recognizing and accepting that these two things must exist parallel to each other. We cannot abandon our stories and our myths in order to embrace some more, quote, factual reality. And when we do that, we are in danger of embracing a literalism that really begins to calcify and enshrine belief systems. Now remember, belief system is identity. So when we're talking about calcifying and enshrining belief systems, we say, oh, this is what the data says, right? Because we've abandoned story and myth, we cannot acknowledge our bias in saying, this is the story that I'm invested in telling. And so these are the questions that I'm going to ask. And these are the standards that I'm going to measure the data against. No, we deify the data and we deify facts as if they stand separately and exist outside of our identities, of our belief systems. And so it's so important during this Virgo phase of mutable madness that goes up the next notch this week, with the sun entering Virgo tomorrow. It's so important that we refrain from going to extremes. It's important that we not fight conviction with data. It's important that we not fight myth and story with research and analysis. It's important that we refrain from doing that because people do not believe what they believe because they read a study or got data or researched it. People do not believe what they believe because someone showed them the equation to prove them wrong. I keep repeating this because unfortunately, those of us who are liberal and progressive in our politics, those of us who are seeking liberation through our spiritualities, through our politics, through our communities, through our work, etc., we are the ones most guilty of getting caught up on whether something is factual or not, right? Because unfortunately, the assumption is that people are stupid. And so if people are stupid, they believe what they believe because they just don't understand the facts. They just don't have enough information to make an educated guess or opinion. They don't have enough data, right, or knowledge. Because if they did, they would come to the same conclusion as you would, right? This is very erroneous thinking. And anyone who wants to win an election and who is progressive-minded and liberal needs to understand that no one cares about your facts. No one cares about your data. The people who care about facts and data already agree with you, right? So what is it that we're up against when we recognize that we cannot use an equation or data or statistics or analysis? I mean, the alarm around the maternal death rate for Black women in America has been rung for years. Who cares? No one cares. No one cares. Now, I care, of course. I'm a black woman who would like to have another child, and I would like to not die in labor or via complications after delivery. But unfortunately, it does us a disservice to assume that people are stupid. Now, I throw this around a lot. I get really annoyed with people who do stuff that is illogical and irrational. I get really annoyed with it, and I call people dumb, and I be like, wow, you really are dumb. But at the same time, I think the more appropriate description of these people is that they are dogmatic. And there's a difference, right? Dogma, doctrine, myth, and story never, ever, ever have to do with facts. They don't have to do with facts, right? They have to do with, I want to stay who I am because changing who I am feels like death. Relinquishing my identity results in a loss of power or perceived loss of power or status. And so if you bring me some facts that challenge my entitlement, authority, or power, I won't believe you. I won't see it. I won't understand. I might even say, wow, that makes a lot of sense. 1 + 1 = 2. I can see that, but no, I'm good. Right? So as we're dealing with conflicts in our personal life that are exacerbated as we enter each new phase of Mutable Madness 2019, because each new phase of Mutable Madness 2019, we're in the Virgo phase now, squares the previous phase, opposes the phase before that phase, and squares the upcoming phase. So all of the square and the opposition is about, how do you know what you know, and why do you believe what you believe? Pisces discerns with the bodies. It's biological. It's physiological. Gemini has read it in a book, researched it, talked about it, had a conversation, heard it from somebody. Virgo has the data. Right? But where we're headed here with the eclipse in Sagittarius at the end of this year, and then we've got a Gemini eclipse in January. Where we're headed, though, in this Sagittarius eclipse is towards fire. Virgo pushes us to want to quantify things. You're like, oh, let me just gather this data and these numbers and send it on over to you. It's not really helpful. Now, this is not to say that one should not use data and numbers. It's important to articulate certain things. I posted a scripture last week that I've been wanting to talk about for a while, and I am going to probably do that today if I can get my mind right. I might have to have some coffee. And I talked about we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities. Ephesians chapter 12, something like that. And so I really took that to mean that this current battle we're in against fascism and authoritarianism, against racism, misogyny, misogynoir, homophobia, transphobia, this is not a battle of, here is the data that is proving how these policies have affected me. Here is the data on suicide. Here is the data on the maternal mortality rate for black women. Here is the data on the number of people in prison. Here is this is not a matter of tangible evidence. This is not about, someone being able to tangibly quantify a reality. I'm going to talk more about this on Twitter today, so if you don't follow me, you should, because I'm going to be throwing off some tweets. And I'm going to leave it at that. This week, hold on, if you can't see me, I just want to look at my calendar this week. I know the sun enters Virgo tomorrow. Saturn stations direct this week. That is the other indirect action work. Then would this be more of an ethos argument? I don't know how you're going to take this. Hold on, let me just figure out what else is happening this week. Oh, that's it. Mercury square Saturn on Sunday, Saturn direct. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So someone's asking about taking direct action with regard to their convictions. And I would say the route to go is not throwing numbers at people, right? The route to go is through story. It's through identity, right? And so I don't mean identity as necessarily black, white, brown, because people shut down if they read something they feel does not pertain to them, even if it does. So it really, really, really requires for you to get into the shoes of the people you are trying to communicate with. This is the whole point of mutable madness. Translation, articulation, and interpretation. If I want to talk to a child, like this happened last night. My son at bedtime has to ask 50 million questions and have all kind of conversations. So last night, he was trying to understand the 12 houses and being in a Mars year and Mars moving through his chart. And so he's like, okay, can you explain to me what these houses mean and what happens when this happens and blah, 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 right? And so I opened up one of my guides and I was like, man, this language is really problematic because I can't make my 6-year-old understand this. Like these words that I've used are not, they're not helpful, right? So I had to sit there and really think about how to articulate the concept of Mars to my 7-year-old. And so I had to tell a story. I had to create an image for him using words. And so what I did was I was like, well, Mars is like, you feel different than I feel, and that's okay. What you like or what hurts you may not be something I like, or it may not be something that hurts me, and that's okay. Sometimes you don't like what I say, and that's Mars. Sometimes we yell and fight at each other, right? So we're using experience and examples to articulate this concept. And so I would say to you, act like you're talking to 6-year-olds and that you need to translate, articulate, and interpret because you want a specific audience of people to hear you and understand you. So who is the audience of people that you want to hear and understand you, right? This is, I think, one of the really most important issues when it comes to organizing. Who are you talking to, right? Of course, as an organizer, you're trying to galvanize support and make something visible for people who would agree with you. So there are certain people who would agree with what you're doing and would want to support what you're doing, but they just don't know about it. That's one step. So you have to talk to those people. But then there are other people who don't know what you're talking about and don't care, but could care if you convince them. And then, of course, there's the people who know what you're talking about and don't care, and there's nothing you can say to them. So you just don't even talk to those people. So that's my advice for that this is about story, and this is about myth, and this is about identity. This is not about data. This is not about numbers. No one cares about numbers. Like, I really wish that I could hit this home for you, that unless you work at a bank and unless you're a cashier who has their drawer balanced every day, like, no one cares about numbers. No one cares about numbers when it comes to belief, identity, and politics. I'm sorry. So your research and your data is not for them. Use your research and your data for you. Use your numbers for you. And then when you need to talk to other people about it, you need to figure out how to translate that data into story. And I don't mean like how the corny politicians do it. The other day I was down in Charlotte and a little 6-year-old girl came up to me. It's like, come on, man, get out of here with that BS, right? I'm not a 6-year-old little girl, and I don't care, right? So this really requires to get outside of ourselves. It really requires for us to get into other people's minds, understanding people's motivations, And this is why the Leo phase was so important, that we deal with our projections, because when we deal with people as if they are us, if I look at a person and I talk to them as if they are me, the likelihood that they will understand me is probably zero, right? And so it's so important for me to disconnect from my own projections so that I could be effective in communication, right? So the last thing is that Saturn stations direct this week, and Saturn has been really sitting at this 21, 20, and 19 degrees of Saturn for a very long time now, really since early August, I want to say, maybe late July if I'm not mistaken. And Saturn has gotten louder and louder and louder and louder and louder because it's stationary direct conjunct the node. So when we talk about eclipse story and eclipse season, this Saturn direct is all a part of that. Saturn is very close to where it was at the beginning of January this year when we had an eclipse in Sagittarius. Very close to the actual degree of the eclipse we had in January that was in Sagittarius. And it will be revisiting all of that. So Saturn is really back where it was in February of this year. So be thinking about what your February was like. That was a major, major pivot and turning point in so many ways for us. And it was, as we were really getting into the meat of the Pisces phase of mutable madness 2019. So Saturn is back there. Saturn is reality. I keep trying to find a different word to articulate that, but it's real simple. Saturn is reality. Saturn is not what you think you should have. Saturn is not what you think you should do. Saturn is not what you believe is possible. Saturn is not what you believe other people are thinking. Has nothing to do with belief or should. Saturn is about what is. And Saturn in Sagittarius says, reality is what I believe it is. Oh, you see the problem? Especially when you're not honest about your beliefs and your bias and your convictions. So Saturn's uncomfortable in Sagittarius, and this is why we see people like doubling down on stuff that obviously doesn't make sense, factually inaccurate, and so you got to fight fire with fire. You cannot fight fire with air, because when you fight fire with air, you just getting people riled up and they double down. I mean, you could try to fight fire with earth, but most of the time, that's not sustainable long term. And you can fight fire with water for sure, but ain't no water in the sky besides Jupiter. So good luck with that. Although, when I see my clients who are missing elements in their birth chart, I always tell them, one, look for the transit. Look for the transit. If you're missing air, look for the air transit. Look for the Libra, Aquarius, and Gemini transit. But also, there are ways you can fabricate the element that you're missing in your chart. So if we need to fabricate fire, if we need to fabricate water in this fight, we are going to fabricate, we are going to focus on our survival, right? When we're really focusing on our survival with the water that's actually in the sky, this is all about climate change, right? But identity, apparently, preserving identity is more important than preserving the body. We'll see how long that lasts, right? Got a little crusty. So that's all I have to say. I'm gonna put this up on YouTube for those of you who are just joining in. It'll be up on my Instagram page for the next 24 hours. I'm gonna be getting some tweets off today as soon as I catch my breath and get my life right. Hope you all are, having a good Monday. Moon enters Aries today. That ought to be fun. Right. See you guys later. Have a happy Monday.